Okay, recording has started.
Okay. Okay. A couple more minutes and then we'll.
Okay.
Yeah, Michelle, you're good?
Okay, when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Melba. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to say a special welcome to all those in attendance to our webinar on St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Disaster Preparedness and Tourism. My name is Hayden Jason Jones, the chairperson of CARI-ON SVG Disaster Preparedness. I'm fortunate to be one of the founding members of CARI-ON. Alongside me tonight, I'm happy to have as my co-moderator or host, Ms. Melba de Silva. Melba is the vice chair of CARI-ON and also a founding member. Melba has dedicated many of her years volunteering her services in the SVG community and is the owner of Mel Tay Properties, Inc. Melba has worked at Suncor Inc., Energy Inc., and has recently been promoted to Scrum Master. I don't know exactly what a Scrum Master does, but it sounds very interesting, Melba. Melba has 2 certificates in personal and corporate business Canadian taxes, a degree in hotel restaurant management, and her PMP. Melba has been a great source of support and brings so much needed skill sets and professionalism to our organization. We're truly happy to have her on our team. Now, for those of you that have not heard of CARI-ON, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing active, timely relief efforts, educational, informative resources, helping families and communities to carry on before, after, and during disasters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The organization has been around now for more than a year, and we are poised and excited about the future, about future accomplishments. Now, CARI-ON is a part of an umbrella organization here in the Greater Toronto area called CADIRA. And the purpose of CADIRA is to provide emergency relief assistance, financial, material, technical, and or advisory to the countries in the Caribbean in the event of any major national emergency or disaster situations resulting from natural disasters, fires, disease, or other. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to go through a few housekeeping items. First of all, by any chance, if your mic becomes unmuted, could you quickly mute yourself again? And also ask that you share any questions or comments in our Zoom or Facebook chat box. We'll make every attempt to get to those questions, but just in case we do not, our email address, and Melba, if you could just put it in the chat box there for me, please, that would be great. It's carion.org@gmail.com. So please feel free to share your thoughts, questions, and we'll make every attempt to get to them. As you know, we're in the midst of a pandemic, which has disrupted our regular fundraising efforts. We at CARI-ON continue to keep the community informed about issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And as we do so, we're asking the general public for donations wherever possible to support the worthy cause that could affect all Vincentian nationals. So please, if you have any contributions, we'd be happy to take them. And it can be done via e-transfer. Our email address, again, should be in the chat box. I think Melba just put it there, but it's carion.org@gmail.com. And lastly, I would encourage you to visit our social media pages, to like us and follow us. That said, I'd like to now pass it over to Melba de Silva. Melba.
Thank you, Hayden, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on our social media feeds as well as here through our Zoom. I just want to give you a little bit of stats on the hurricane season, actually, so you just get a little bit of basis of what we're going to talk about here this evening. The official Atlantic hurricane season runs from June to November, so we are currently in the hurricane season. It mostly makes landfall in the September months. On an average, there's 10.1 named storms occurred each season, and around 5.9 becoming hurricanes. Not every tropical storm, as you know, becomes a hurricane. And about 2.5 becoming major hurricanes, which is categorized at 3 or higher. The most of the active season was actually in 2005, when 28 tropical cyclones formed, of which recorded 15 became hurricanes. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season activity is projected to be well above average. So we're a little bit concerned. According to the triple non-resident scholar, Dr. Phil Klotzbach and his team at the Colorado State University, CSU, they forecast that we'll have 20 named storms this season, including 5 that have already been named as of July the 6th of this year. 9 potentially becoming hurricanes and 4 becoming major hurricanes, which is well above the average probability for major hurricanes, and which may likely make landfall along with the continent of the United States and coastline of the Caribbean, which includes St. Vincent and the Grenadiers, which we'll be talking about today. A typical year, just to give you a little bit of reference, is only 12. So once again, it's way above average what they predict for this year. So just to talk a little bit about hurricane disaster preparedness, we have the expert in-house. I'm so happy that we're able to have Michelle Forbes, the director of NEMO of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, here with us to give us a little bit of insight on disaster preparedness and the hurricane season, which we're currently in. Just a little bit about Ms. Forbes, a little bit of history about her. She joined the staff on the National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, on December the 1st of 2004 as a deputy director. Prior joining the staff of NEMO, Ms. Forbes was an air traffic controller at the E.T. Joshua Airport. Ms. Forbes says she's truly blessed to have a career and that she thoroughly enjoys. Ms. Forbes holds a Bachelor of Science in Honors in the International Disaster Engineering and Management of Coventry University in the United Kingdom. Ms. Forbes was awarded the Fulbright Scholarship in 2008 and went on to complete her master's in the public administration and a graduate certificate in disaster management from the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies in Georgia State University, Atlanta, Georgia, United States. And Ms. Forbes was appointed the post-in director on 27th of May 2017. So here is Ms. Forbes. I welcome you to talk to us a little bit about NEMO and disaster preparedness for St. Vincent. Over to you, Ms. Forbes. You can unmute your mic, please. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me on your program tonight. And thanks for this venture in really informing our Vincentians in the diaspora, in Canada in particular, on the work of the organization and what is happening here in St. Vincent. Only more, we're a young organization. We were established in 2002, so we're now getting out of the teenage years. And back then, we had no single organization that was charged with disaster. After several years of being impacted by storms and other disasters over a period of time, we continue as a country, continue to ask for assistance, but what are we doing for ourselves? And hence NEMO was formed. We now have a complement of 17 staff, And this 17 is so because we had the software monitoring unit that is charged with monitoring the responsibility also for the monitoring of the last software volcano, which falls under us. Now, I want to zero in as we're speaking about the hurricane season. As Melba already said, we in about 8 named storms for this season, and it's only 2 months. We're not yet 2 months into the season. And as we see the Sahara dust clears over the next the way for some of the systems coming off the African coast. And this is so because we have had quite a bit of warm temperatures. If you note and you have been following your news in terms of our temperatures around the world over the last few years, every year we have been recording higher temperatures than normal. And this year is no exception. We have already surpassed some of the records. The temperatures in the sea temperatures are quite warm. The environment is quite conducive for formation of storms. As we see the Sahara dust clear, and we are seeing some clearing now, and we have had basically two systems with some potential for development over the next few days. Now, just to discuss what happens really when a storm is approaching. Now, the Met Services and Meteorological Service that is responsible for disseminating information on and giving the forecast for any hurricane that is approaching St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And they will inform us, we monitor ourselves, of course, and they will inform us of any unusual development or anything that they're monitoring coming across the Atlantic or in and around to develop. And we basically start looking at it and having some discussions on what we're seeing or the potential forecast, the possibility. Now, and I'll give you an example of last week. So we were monitoring potential tropical storm Gonzalo. So we were speaking to each other. By the time it formed a depression, here at NEMO, it's our job to ensure that we alert all the agencies of government, the NGOs that we work closely with, that have a responsibility. We sit here at NEMO. NEMO is really the secretariat of the organization. The 17 persons who are there are really the secretariat. All agencies form part of the broader NEMO. So for example, if something happens and there are landslides, etc., it is not NEMO per se as a secretariat who deals with clearing the roads and all of that. It is BRAGSA now. The information is passed to them. They have the information at the same time, and they are the ones who deploy their teams, the backhoes and the trucks and all of that to ensure this. From the Ministry of Transport and Works and the Physical Planning Department that goes out to do the assessments. So NEMO is really a coordinating agency, ensuring that all agencies of government, all the key agencies are informed. At the same time, they're ready for us to work as a team to manage an event. So I go back now to Gonzalo as it was approaching. So we informed all of our agencies. We let them know what the Met Services rainfall, and when we see the rain, it is not a good sign because we know we can remember the 2013 floods, the kind of rainfall in 4 hours, and it can be quite scary. So once you have that kind of rainfall and flooding, you can have flooding and landslides. So it depends on the it really. And we tend to focus on what the potential hazard will be. Of course, with storms, hurricanes, it comes with the strong winds, the floods, and the storm surge. And for this particular event last week, we were really looking at the rainfall. And of course, we were happy that it went south and it didn't do much damage or very little damage. And we're thankful that it went that way, but we don't know when the next one is going to come our way. So we have to continue to prepare for these systems. And so that's the general preparation. Now, we as an agency, we coordinate disaster management activities. So therefore, if someone comes to St. Vincent and want to implement a project or program for the country, they will chat with us. We chat with other agencies too, because if it is something on mitigation, we do not do mitigation, but we may be able to say, well, okay, we have been having challenges in a particular area. A community has maybe have been challenges being flooded every year. and we need to look at how can we mitigate to reduce the impact of flooding in that particular community. So we will discuss with our partners, whether it's the Ministry of Transport and Works, other agencies, well, you know, the communities that we have been having reports from, the families who have been impacted, because once the reports are, people have been impacted, all those reports come to us. And we'll discuss with the various agencies what communities, what areas that we can cooperate in. So we will not be doing the physical work ourselves as an agency, but we do have input in some of the communities or some of the areas that we will want to see work being done. The rivers, we may want to be seeing done some flood river defense, some of the communities in terms of coastal defense. Some of the emergency shelters we may want to see upgraded. Those are where we have the input and be able to say, well, okay, South Rivers do not have enough emergency shelters. Can we retrofit a building in that community? Rose Hall Rose Hall Community Center need to be retrofitted. Rose Bank. So those are the kind of input that we're having. And one such project that had completed recently would be the Camden Park Community Center. If some of you are familiar with Camden Park area. Now that community center was a bit run down for quite a few years. And we have been advocating for that community center to be retrofitted for quite some time. And thankfully, it has been retrofitted, and we have a brand new community center to use as a hurricane shelter for 2020, based on our advocacy, and continue to realize that there are large populations that we may not have enough shelters, that we need to ensure that we have suitable facilities. Let me go over time. So in terms of the relief operations now, I just want to give you a snapshot on that, because I think that is one of the areas that the diaspora always look forward to lending support when we have an event and when we have been impacted. Now, when we have been impacted by heavy rains or a storm, hurricane, we coordinate the activities here at the NEMO headquarters. So last week we stayed here, we slept here Friday night. We went home Saturday evening, but once we're into operations, we activate what we call the Emergency Operations Center, and we basically, all the agencies of government that has a responsibility come and sit with us here, and we decide together how we are managing things. Once we have been impacted by an event, we do what we call an assessment based on the reports that we have received, and actually on the ground assessments by various agencies to determine the communities that have been impacted, the infrastructure that has been impacted, and these are documented. It is our job to ensure that what we call a damage assessment, is completed, looking at the social and the needs of the people also, so we can determine how do we prioritize. When that is done or ongoing, we generate what we call a needs list or priority list, and that list is really shared with all of our partners, locally, regionally, internationally, and you receive that list too. So for example, if you come together and you say, we want to support St. Vincent and the Grenadiers in this effort, you will look at that list and determine how are you best able to support us. And it's important that you really look at that list, because sometimes we get donations that we did not ask for. And I go back to 2013 in particular, we never asked for water, but we got containers of water 3-4 months afterwards. So it's important to understand that when we, as an organization, different agencies come together and say, these are our needs, that we prioritize and disseminate, those are our needs, because sometimes you have an influx of things that you know that you want to need 3 or 4 months later down the road. And it takes a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks in some cases, for us to receive supplies. So by that 3 weeks, the needs would have changed. So we have to constantly be in dialogue with each other. Now, I will go a little bit to the COVID operations, because I know you may have some questions for me later. Since January, as a matter of fact, the National Emergency Management Organization is always there to support the Ministry of Health. In our national structure, there are 10 subcommittees, including the Health Services Committee, which is chaired by the Chief Medical Officer. And when the task force, the coronavirus task force, was established in January, we have always been a member. We have always been a member of the any pandemic task force that has been established. We're part of the Ebola task force. We're part of the coronavirus task force. And we're always there to support the Ministry of Health. Operations switch a little bit to NEMO headquarters in March this year, after we had that case, this case number 2. And since then, we have been operating here every day, almost every day, up to 10, sometimes 11 o'clock in the evening, working with the Ministry of Health, supporting them in the logistics, supporting them in the contact tracing, because we are one department that within 15 minutes, we can be up and running, have 10 phone lines ready for any department to conduct their emergency operations and making their calls. So here to support the Ministry of Health, and we have been working with them in this effort. So I will leave it here now, and if anybody later on, I can come back and expand on any point that you would wish me to expand on.
Melba?
Thank you so much, Ms. Forbes. Wow, that's a phenomenal piece of information. I learned so much there. And you are so well versed in your area of expertise. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of more questions on COVID-19 relief efforts, protocol, as well as disaster preparedness. I myself have a few questions that I've noted as well that I'll ask you later. But right now I'm going to hand it back over to Hayden so he can carry us through the next part of our webinar. Over to you.
Sure, thanks Melba. So what I'm going to do now is just introduce Shelley John, and then we're going to speak a little bit about tourism and COVID and how it's affected travel to and fro St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Shelley John joined the staff of SVG Tourism Authority in April 2008 as the Director of Sales. Prior to joining the staff of SVG Tourism Authority, Shelley was the confidential secretary assistant to the financial controller at Mystique Company Limited. Mrs. John studied business administration, business management at the University of Toronto, and hospitality management at Humber College. Shelley is no stranger to the SVG community in Toronto, having lived here for, I believe, over 18 years. And of course, she's well known abroad as well. And she's dedicated the last 10 years of service to the SVG Tourism Authority. So that's a little bit about Shelley. Now, before I bring Shelley on to, say a few words, I just wanted to give you an update on the COVID stats. So as of today, from what I understand, there were 2 new cases reported in St. Vincent, making it a total of 52 over the period of, I guess, from the inception of the disease. 39 have recovered and 0 have died. Now, I'm going to put this out to Shelley as well. Now, we know that we've seen reporting on social media about the flight from Miami going to Toronto, going to SVG. And then we had a Toronto flight that left last Thursday as well. That was the first one, I believe, from Air Canada going down there. But, we see all these stats on social media. So we just wanted you to speak to them because oftentimes they're not qualified or quantified, or so people don't know exactly what these stats mean. So if you could just start off with that, and then you can go ahead and brief us on your presentation.
Okay, hi Hayden. Hi everybody. Thanks for having me here today. COVID. Where do we start with that? Okay, the stats actually have been the same since last week. So we can easily say that our Canadian flight didn't add to the stats as at today. It's been at 52 since last week. The quarantine people are not on the list because it continues to fluctuate. I think what has been happening is that people are going into quarantine and coming out, so it was not logical to keep updating it. It was never correct. So I think the main thing is that 52 people have been affected to date, and a certain number are in quarantine, a certain number are recovering. With regard to Canada, I think our situation here is a little, well, not as bad as the US, because the numbers certainly jumped after the US flights entered St. Vincent. We have different protocols for the US and for Canada because of that. Right now, anybody arriving from the US have to quarantine for 5 days in a hotel at their expense. And it's important that people note that, and that they don't arrive in St. Vincent and be surprised that they have to show a reservation at a hotel. From Canada, and for everybody, we do require that you have a negative PCR COVID-19 test. You have it done 5 days before arrival into St. Vincent, and you have proof of it once you arrive in St. Vincent. It should be from a reputable lab, hospital, or whatever, but it must be presented on arrival. If you do not present a negative PCR test, you will be tested on the ground. During the first phase, we have not been charging, but coming into the second phase, it will be $40 for non-Vincentians and $20 for Vincentians. But as of now, it's a fluid situation. It's the first set of flights coming into St. Vincent and the Grenadines since March. Both American Airlines and Air Canada had their last flights at the end of March. So this period from the 11th, when there was an American flight, till now, it's, you know, we're still monitoring the situation, and things may change depending on how the numbers increase. We do ask people to complete the pre-arrival travel form online, and you can find it on the government website or the Ministry of Health, which is moh.gov.vc. Complete the form. It can be submitted online, so it's there when you arrive. It will be pulled up by the port health officials, and you know, you go through the necessary questioning, all the protocols there. If you have to have a test done, it will be done at the airport, and then you dispatch yourself to where you're going. For Canadians, we have to quarantine for 48 hours, whether or not you have a negative PCR test. So that is to ensure that everybody on the flight is clear. So for people who have done tests on arrival in St. Vincent, everybody will be waiting until they know the results. Because if somebody happens to have been seated or in close proximity or in contact with somebody who has tested positive, we need to know that before you exit quarantine. So people have been staying either in a government-approved private home or in a hotel. So if your home is not suitable to quarantine in, which means you have your own bedroom, bathroom, and eating facilities, if you don't have that, more than likely you will have to go to a hotel for 48 hours. Clearly, COVID has negatively impacted our visitor bookings this year. And after a really good year last year, hitting just about the 10,000 mark visitors from Canada, this year is proven to be not that way. While people would like to travel, Canada also has restrictions. So they are not allowing people who are non-Canadian, that is to say permanent resident or citizens, back into Canada. So if you have a visitor's visa, you can't enter. So these are some of the things that are impacting travel from St. Vincent and the Grenadines to Toronto right now. Also, people from Canada who would like to slip down for a week or two do not wish to quarantine for 14 days when they get back, which is a current protocoling restriction in Canada now. So needless to say, we have a lot of people going back and forth who was stranded here, who was stranded there. We just have to hope that things improve, and that in the coming months, we hope that we do not end up like what is just happening in Europe, where there's now a second wave in Italy, France, Sweden, Spain in particular. There's now a second wave, so we just have to hope that that doesn't happen here and that things pick up, because we do have good bookings going into the winter season, even as of now. So I don't know if you'd like me to stop there and see if there are any.
Sure. Thank you, Shelley. That was very, very, very informative. Good information for us to know. I'd just like to maybe touch base with Michelle. Did you have anything to add to what Shelley just mentioned in regards to COVID? Any stats or just anything?
No, the stats are correct. I just want to encourage persons who are coming home to really follow the protocols. That we see persons arriving have not really been adhering to some of the protocols, have not been compliant, and it's really for your safety and our safety to ensure that you follow those. So she has summed it up nicely. I think a lot of persons are still asking some questions about the protocols for each country. We saw Canada is one, but if you're coming from the US, you have to go to the hotel, and not just that, you have to come with your PCR negative test. That's a mandatory. We saw last Saturday, persons were refused to board American Airlines because they did not have their PCR tests or did not have it within that particular time frame. And it's important that you ensure that you have a copy of that PCR test and fill your reservations, and you also fill out the pre-arrival form for the officials so they can actually do commence their own risk assessment.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. Just a reminder, if you guys, anybody attending the webinar, if you have questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I know Melba has been in there putting some information in there, but please share your thoughts, your questions. We'd love to have them and pass them along to Michelle and Shelley. Melba, we do have a couple of questions. Did you want to go ahead with the first question for NEMO?
Thank you, Hayden. So Ms. Forbes, let me just make sure I unmute you here so you can answer. I just wanted to ask you about, you spoke a lot about disaster preparedness, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about the mitigation plans for floods and landslides specifically, because over here in the diaspora, we see a lot of flooding during the hurricane season with tropical storms and depressions. So just wondering, what are some of the mitigation plans that St. Vincent has in place for that?
Okay, we have over the years been mapping our areas in terms of our flood hazard risk, and we have, so we pretty much know the areas that are prone to flooding, the flash flooding events. So we are not necessarily responsible for the mitigation. Any mitigation works are done by the Ministry of Transport and Works and the departments such as BRAGSA that may do some river defense. But it is our, we identify those high flood risk areas, and we basically develop programs and flood information that we actually go into those communities and basically alert them to their flood risk. So we have areas that we know like South Rivers, Spring Village, Vermont, Bookament, and we know those areas that are prone to flooding. We know the areas that are prone to landslides, and we zero in on those communities, both us and the Met Services, when we know we are going to have heavy rainfall that can produce flooding and landslides, in really focusing on our alerting procedures, alerting the persons that we have heavy rainfall and the potential for flooding downstream is real. And I go back to Hurricane Matthew in 2016. It was Tropical Storm Matthew, just bordering hurricane when it crossed St. Vincent and the Grenadiers. And we have been developing systems in country in collaboration with the Met Services and the Central Water and Sewage Authority in particular has done a lot of networking on ensuring that we have what we call stream flow instruments along several rivers that tend to flood easily. And we're able in that particular instance in Matthew, be able to warn the public on the persons along the river in Bookament in particular from Vermont, that the river was reaching a particular threshold. So we're able to monitor some of the rivers, not all, some of the rivers in real time so that we can actually have a little warning time, so we can actually inform the communities downstream. And we do this in collaboration with the Red Cross, because the Red Cross have communities and community disaster response teams within some of these communities that we're able to send that alert quickly, and then they inform the other persons within the community. But in terms of mitigation, we basically work with the agencies to identify some of the communities and some of the rivers and areas that are prone to flooding, and how we can develop programs and projects to mitigate against some of the flood impacts that have been happening over the years, and so too for landslide.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Forbes. That's great to hear that you actually have real-time alert process available there in St. Vincent. That's just to show the technology and the sophistication of that you have set in place. So that's fantastic. Actually, Hayden, if you don't mind, I just want to have a follow-up question for Ms. Forbes, and we have one that came in here on Facebook as well. It goes along the same lines of nationals actually preparing themselves. What can they do to prepare themselves for the hurricane season, potential flooding, even though you give the alerts? Like, what type of measures can nationals do to prepare themselves in the event of an emergency?
There's so much we can do as individuals, because preparing for disasters is really an individual responsibility. And if all of us are ready, it will actually be better for us at the national level, where we can actually start seeing reduced impacts from these events. Now, we're in the hurricane season. We live with this threat of a storm or hurricane, or we call cyclone, for 6 months of the year. And there's so many things that you, and I like to go back to the beginning, where when we are building or constructing, many of us now tend to build in communities that we did not grow up in. And we may build, I mean, I'm a perfect example. I live in a community that I knew nothing about, and I have a home there. And we need to understand the risk, basically the hazards that community have been exposed to over the years. When you're looking at even buying a piece of land, try to go also when we have had heavy rains, to see how the water is flowing around that piece of land, to see whether the water is just flowing straight through it, whether it's soggy and all of those things, the type of grass that is growing around in that particular land that you plan to buy. And that gives you some idea of what is happening with that piece of land, whether it's going to be dry, whether it's going to be soggy. And when you build that house, the same conditions you saw there before is what you're going to experience when you do that. So we need to basically have that history of what has happened in the community that we are living in, so that we know in the future these things are going to happen. Where we build, we need to understand that if we're going to build close to the sea, we know we have to build a bit far back from the sea, so that we're not being impacted from the storm surge. We know if you build on a hillside, you must have your retaining wall to secure your house. And you know, of course, if you build below a river bank, below a bank, not on a river bank, we don't expect persons to be building in the rivers. But if you build below a river bank, then you know the bank can come down on you too when there's heavy rain. So know where you are building, know the hazards that you have been exposed to. And of course, when you're constructing your home, follow the building codes. You don't have to build a $400,000 house. You can build a nice, decent house using the building codes, and also ensure that it is safe. Follow the building codes, ensure that you have enough steel in the house, ensure that your foundation is solid. Just as in life, you have a good foundation with your home. If the foundation of your home is solid, it is more likely to withstand a storm or a hurricane. So those are some of the things you start with. So the construction of your home. Of course, we know not everyone can build, can go to the bank and borrow $200,000 to build a house. Our tradition here in St. Vincent and the Grenadiers is that you grow up in a family house, you may change from a board to a concrete, you build on a room here, you build on a room there. But you can still adhere to the building codes, ensuring that every room that you build on is actually built according to the standards. We have seen too many times when we have strong winds or a storm, that we have homes that are built without one piece of steel. You have a whole side of a house, not one piece of steel. And of course, it will come tumbling down when you have strong winds that constantly pound against that wall, because there's nothing there holding that wall. So we have to ensure, as I like to say, you don't chinks on the steel, you don't chinks on the materials that is used for constructing your homes. So you want to start with your home. Even if you know, bit by bit, you improve yourself over a period of time. You don't stay one way. So you not mean that you have to build a whole brand new house overnight. You take your time, and you can actually build properly as we go along. Some of the things we take for granted is ensuring that we have enough food supply and water. And those of you who grew up in St. Vincent know that when we were growing up, our grandmothers always had a pot of water somewhere. You know, now we tend to have to throw away that tradition a bit more, because our water supply is so reliable, so that we don't think that it's going to go. But when it does go, and for a couple of days, because we have had landslides, we have had heavy rainfall, it does impact us. And we know we're not accustomed bathing with a bucket of water or so on. We have to ensure that we have enough water supply to last a couple of days, and we have to ensure we have enough food supply to last a couple of days. We need to go back to some of the old tradition too. You have banana, you have plantains. If we have strong winds and those blow down, I mean, people throw up their hands, oh, I have nothing to eat. But if I have some plantains that blow down, if I had some green bananas that blow down, you have to know how to use those things. And I always go back to an example. In 2016 in particular, we had a family that they had a huge landslide under their home and they had to move to a shelter. And they bought a whole bag of roast breadfruit, and we couldn't understand what they were doing with this bag of breadfruit. It's not until the father broke down later on and he said, Miss Forbes, this is all I had to eat. Because I know I have the roast breadfruit, it can last me a couple of days. It's not going to spoil. But if I find at $5, I can send and buy a few pieces of chicken and roast that breadfruit with. I can fry a few pieces for breakfast. You know, I can have it for a couple of days. And we need to go back to some of those survival skills. How do we survive after a few days with the things that we actually grow here in St. Vincent and the Grenadiers, the dasheen, the potatoes, because some of those things will still be up. We'll not lose them, especially if it's a wind event. If it's a flood event, it's a little different, because once the flood waters have contaminated the foodstuff, whether it's a plantain, whether it's a breadfruit or potato, we don't want you to use them, because then, of course, it has been contaminated. So we have to go back to some of those surviving survival techniques that we would have had in the past, and really continue some of those techniques going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. That's fantastic. I hope everybody takes heed of your advice and your guidance there on, especially now that we're in the hurricane season. I'm just going to pass it over to Hayden, and Hayden, just note that we do have other questions coming in on our Facebook feed, and encourage people to continue to post their questions, and we will address you shortly.
Okay, thanks, Melba. So I just wanted to say to Michelle, really good practical information. I mean, I've lived in Canada or abroad most of my life, so you know the tips you just gave, I would not necessarily have thought about them, but it's so important that people who are living in St. Vincent really take this information to heart, and in a way to help them prepare in the event of a hurricane, landslide, or whatever the disaster is. So thanks again for sharing that. And the fact that you guys have building codes in place, I'm sitting here laughing. It's not funny, but I never even imagined. I know, Melba, you've built in St. Vincent, so you must know what those codes are. But just again, this is learning for me. I'm being schooled. Thank you for that. I just wanted to shoot a question over to Shelley right now, and you may have touched on it already, but the question came in and it's asked, how are you notified of your test results in SVG once you have your PCR test done?
Okay, persons are notified by phone. When you fill out your arrival form, all your arrival information would be there. So you would leave a phone number that you can be reached at. And in the case of Canadians, we should be at a hotel for 48 hours in the first instance. So if your result is positive, you will be contacted at the hotel. You'll be spoken to. If you do not have any underlying symptom, in other words, if you're not unwell, you can either continue to quarantine at the hotel, obviously at your own cost, or you can go to your private accommodation once it meets the approval to spend the rest of the time to recuperate. If you are ill, however, you will be taken to the government isolation center where you will be looked after there until recovery. So they will contact you. If you are not contacted, needless to say, everything is a-okay and you're set to go.
So let me understand. So they will only contact you if the test is positive?
They are supposed to contact everybody, but I know there is instances where people said they were not contacted. As I said, things are changing on the ground all the time. And I know some people said that, they said if there's no reason for concern, they will not be contacted. But if you are, definitely, you will be contacted. And told how to proceed going forward. I
Okay.
might add too that you are advised to wear your mask in St. Vincent and the Grenadines once you arrive. When you're quarantining, obviously you're by yourself, but other than that, you're asked to wear your mask. From the time you hit the airport here, Ministry of Transport Canada, Air Canada does require you to wear a mask. One other thing I meant to mention, on arrival in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, try not to bring the whole family to the airport, you know, to carry you wherever you have to go. Please limit it to one person, and it's advised that, you know, you sit a good distance away from the person. If you're going to quarantine at home, you know, one person in the back, the other person in the front, that kind of thing. Just as you would do in Canada, we ask you to do the same thing there.
Wonderful. Good commonsensical advice, yes. Thanks, Shelley. Over to you, Melba.
Okay, thanks, Hayden. We have a question that came here. I just want to ask. It's like a double question. Perhaps Ms. Forbes will be able to answer. It's about shelters. I know you did mention about shelters, and there are some set up and some community centers that have been set up to shelter. But what is the protocol for COVID-19 on top of a hurricane situation where sheltering is concerned?
Wow.
That has come in through our Facebook.
Quite a question.
Okay, just to add to what Shelley was saying, once you do a test when you arrive, all persons are informed of their results. Of course, the priority is for those who are positive to get to them quickly, and their contacts, especially if you came on a flight, to get to your contacts in and around who are sitting the rows in front of you, the rows behind, and those at the side. So it's important that but we do try to contact those who are positive first and their immediate contacts. But all the negatives, eventually we get around to calling them, because once the news release is done, after we have informed the positive cases, you know, everybody will be antsy. I wonder if it was me, you know, that kind of thing. So we try to contact everybody who have tested once coming. Now, in terms of emergency shelter, know that the COVID-19 virus tend to spread easily in communal environment. And for 2020, it is 1 year we really ask in persons to look at your home situation, look at your structure. And if you know that you cannot shelter in place, as we call it, make arrangements with friends and family first. Right, so it reduced the number of persons we have in the shelter, reduced the possible spread, of course, in the shelter. Now, when entering emergency shelters beginning this year, everyone must wear a mask. Once you're in the shelter, once you're up and about, you must wear a mask on entering the emergency shelter. You will also be subjected to a temperature check and a health check in terms of the shelter manager. We may have also Red Cross volunteers who will be there supporting at different shelters, and they will go through a series of health checks with you, asking if you've had any cold, any sore throat, any coughing, any high temperature, just asking you that general information. Have you been in quarantine, or have you been in contact with anybody that has been exposed to the COVID-19 virus? Those kind of checks. Now, we have always been doing this, but you stay in families, but the distance will be a little bit more. So if you come to the shelter, Hayden, and you have a family of 5, you will stay together within your family network, and we encourage you not to move about too much. When you're sleeping, if you're sleeping on the cots, if you're sleeping your head up that side, the next person's foot will be towards your head. Hope they don't kick you, but you know, that kind of way. So we avoid person breathing in each other's ear, that kind of way, coughing in anybody's face and that kind of stuff. Right. So you sleep in, one will sleep head and one will sleep. So your foot to the head, and the next person next to you, that kind of, that's the way. So all persons must wear the face mask, all persons subject to the temperature checks on entering and daily. I mean, our shelters are really there so that you can pass the storm or pass the event, and then hopefully if everything is all right, you go back home. But you never know when you're going to have a big event that may not happen. You may not be able to go home for a few days. So once you're in the shelter, your temperature will be checked each day. The shelter managers, the health personnel, the Red Crosses at the shelter will know the temperatures that they have to look for. And once they see a temperature outside of the norm, then the health district health nurse or the district clinic or the health officials will be informed immediately that we have somebody who is showing some increased temperatures. Now, if you're in a building that has the facility, then you're isolated or quarantined, separate once you come into the shelter, showing any type of symptoms once you come into the shelter. So those are the plans that are in place for this hurricane season. And we really want to encourage persons to really adhere to these rules. If you can stay with friends and family, that's the best for us. But of course, you still have to, even though you stay with friends and family, you still have to avoid overcrowding because we don't know where the virus is. Maybe the virus may be, and we don't want it to spread more than it should or more than we would like it to.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. That's great information. Hayden, I'm going to pass it over to you, and keep in mind we have other questions coming in.
Sure. Okay, question for Shelley. Is there a protocol in place for traveling from the mainland to the Grenadiers? I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but answer as best as you can if you do not. Shelley? Shelley?
Okay, good. Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself there. Yes, if you're traveling to the Grenadines, you are advised to wear a mask on the ferry. You're supposed to sanitize your hands before going on board, and obviously keep a good distance. Unless you're traveling in a group, keep a good distance away from the person near to you. Just basic common sense kind of protocols when it comes to going on the boat. I don't know that they have limits as to how many can go on the boat, but these are what they ask you to do. Wear a mask, keep a safe distance, sanitize your hands. As you know, it would be better to sit outdoors too on the ferries as opposed to being in the closed-in areas. But for some people, it's the only mode of transport, and we ask that you definitely try to just observe those protocols.
Okay, thank you. So flights to and from the mainland have been suspended, is that correct? Uh-oh.
Within St. Vincent and the Grenadines, flights are still operational, and I think Michelle can substantiate this, but flights within St. Vincent and the Grenadines are operational. And because St. Vincent and the Grenadines never closed down, so to speak, flights outside of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to some of the other islands are operational also.
Okay, Michelle, did you want to add anything else?
No, that's correct. She has the information.
Okay, over to you, Melba.
Okay, we have a question coming in by one of our attendees right here in the Zoom chat. They asked, Shelley, I believe you covered this, but I guess they just want to be sure, so we're asking again. I guess it's from here in Canada, the Thursday flight, Air Canada flight. Will they be required to quarantine in a hotel for 48 hours? And if their PCR test is negative? And they have a second question as well, asking if you have all your paperwork with your negative results upon arrival, will another COVID test be administered in SVG?
Okay, if you have a negative test from a reputable source in Canada and it meets the requirements that they wish down there, you will not be subjected to another swabbing in St. Vincent and the Grenadines for COVID. You will then leave the airport and go to your private facility where once it's government approved and it's suitable for quarantining, or you will have to be in a hotel for 48 hours. That's your choice. And we have had questions about people saying that, oh, they don't want to have to pay to stay somewhere. If you do have some place at home that you can still meet all the requirements, it's fine. If you don't and you do not want to pay for a hotel room, I suggest that people just stay where they are. I mean, it's as simple as that. All these protocols are for our own safety, to safeguard us, to safeguard the people around us, the people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's not to upset anybody, to make any unnecessary waves. It's all for our own good. So that's just basically what it is.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. So we have another question coming in here. I just want to pass this, if you don't mind, Hayden. I'm just going to pass this over to Ms. Forbes, because I just want to make sure we try to address some of our questions from our viewers, and we encourage people to keep them coming in, actually, whether they're here on the Zoom with us directly or on our Facebook feed. Continue to post your questions, and we will answer them, hopefully, before the session. And if not, you can always email us at carion.org@gmail.com, and we'll be able to respond back to you there. Okay, so we have a question here, Ms. Forbes, if you don't mind. In the event of a disaster in SVG, is there a group of individuals who, if there's a group of individuals who want to make a donation of emergency items to assist the people in SVG, to which agency or organization can they be sent without custom duties having to be paid on those items?
Okay, any items that are sent to the National Emergency Management Organization for the National Emergency Management Organization is not subject to any duty. Anything that comes in NEMO's name is not subject to duty, but it must be for NEMO and to be distributed by NEMO. Some of the challenges we have had over the years is that persons wanting to send something to a particular individual or to a particular community, but once it gets to NEMO, it becomes that of NEMO and it goes into the wider pool, and we determine the areas that the relief supplies will go to. So we know if something happens and let's say Conwy, South Rivers, whichever community is impacted more, you will expect most of the supplies to go to that particular community. But we are the ones who determine how the relief items will be distributed. If you want to send to anyone in particular, you feel free, you can send to anyone else that you want to, but of course then you will have to go through the procedure yourself on applying for the duty-free concession and all of that and distribute to who you want. But if you wanted to come to us, everything is duty-free because we are allowed to bring in stuff because of the nature of our organization for humanitarian assistance.
And Ms. Forbes, just a follow-up, would you like to expand on some of the items that are in need to convert some of these community centers to emergency shelters, which you alluded to earlier on in the discussion?
Okay, can you say that again?
Would you like to maybe give us a sense of what are the items that NEMO would require or that are in need right now to convert some of these community centers into emergency shelters?
We are always in need of cots. Those are one thing. We have cots, yes, but if we have a major impact, we have to learn from the recent events of the Hurricanes Irma and Maria. We realized that over 10% of the population, or just about 10% of the population, was displaced. We always need things like cots for the community, community centers for the all emergency shelters. We need things like utensils and that kind of stuff if we activate in for several days or several nights. And of course, different things that will come. And we don't generally ask for food until an event has happened, but once an event has happened and impacted, we tend to ask for those things. So just basic supplies, toiletries are always important. Many persons come to the shelters without toiletries, and I know in particular, I think Canada was one, our Canadian residents there, one of the first set that actually started packaging those toiletries in the Ziploc bags and so, and sending, and we were able to use those for quite some time. So each family that comes in will get a package based on the size of the family. I mean, we normally encourage persons to bring those supplies themselves to the emergency shelter, because it may take us a few days to get stuff to the shelter depending on where you are and the impact. So there are different things that we can discuss even offline. So we always need things like cots, we need things like water jugs, we need toiletry packages, and if persons' houses are destroyed, we like to have what we call a family pack, in terms of like our little pot sets and little thing that we can actually give to those families and for them to go back into their home when they have cleanup and that kind of things. We always need mattresses in terms of, especially if there's a flood event, because once there's a flood, the flood tends to destroy everything. You would not want to use a mattress. Where you might be able to sun a mattress if rainwater fall on it, not so for flood waters. You have to throw out everything, So those are some of the things that we are always in need of. Some can be bought on the local market, and some may not be able to we may not be able to get on the local markets. One of the things you can pack the hygiene kits, but there's some companies that also have nice hygiene kits. I think we got some actually from Consul General Huggins, the type of hygiene kits that you always need to have some so that you can give families. So those are just a few things, but there's so many other things that we generally need that we can store in our various warehouses.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. Just for our viewing audience, so they get a sense of the type of items that if they would like to donate, to NEMO directly, or those organizations that are listening in or will be listening in later on, can get a sense of what are the needs and to fit the gap of what would be required from NEMO. So thanks. Hayden, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, and I'd just like to follow up on that, Melba. For those of you that joined us late, we are accepting contributions for this worthy cause, either contribution or donation, and it can be done through e-transfer. The email address is carion.org@gmail.com. It's in the chat box there as well. So feel free, we encourage you. We take donations, contributions, wherever we can get them. Question again for Michelle, and perhaps you even spoke about this, but how is NEMO informed of potential tropical storms and or hurricanes, and what is your role?
Okay, we are constantly in constant dialogue with the Met Services, or meteorological services based at the Argyle International Airport. We have one-on-one conversations with the manager of the Met Services, Billy Jeffers, or any of the forecasters that we have on duty. And normally, we tend to be doing our own tracking ourselves because we have our enthusiasts. Within the organization ourselves, we have someone who has a meteorology background also, and we do our own monitoring. And anytime we see something that has a potential, we already start discussing with the Met Services from day one. So we start monitoring, and when it reaches to the stage when we know that it's either a strong tropical wave or even a depression, it is our duty. The Met Office's really duty is the one that they disseminate any information. They're the official agency for meteorological information. We come in where we take that information and basically recirculate it to all of our partners, because the Met Office will have their list of radio stations and media persons on their mailing list who they disseminate information. But it's our duty as NEMO to ensure all the agencies of government, all the agencies that form on the National Disaster Management structure are aware of what is happening. All the communities are aware. So we take up the information now and ensure that we try to get it as far into the communities on the ground throughout all agencies, and basically start pulling together the government agencies and the NGOs that have a national role or mandate to coordinate the national disaster response to an event. So that's how we constantly work with the Met Office. Sometimes, most of the times, we will be chatting at 5 o'clock in the morning when something is approaching for us to make decisions, because after that the phone starts ringing. We chat that early in the morning. Wow. So we can do that. So when we're seeing a potential threat to St. Vincent, it is my job to inform the Honorable Prime Minister, who is my minister, and my permanent secretary, that what we are doing, what we're monitoring, what we are putting in place, and to keep him on the alert that things are happening. In terms of making any declarations whether the country is going to have any closure or what is going to happen, it is the Honorable Prime Minister, who is a chairman of what we call the National Emergency Council, who makes that determination based on the advice that I myself would give him as director and also the head of the Met Services. So we basically tag team together, myself and the head of the Met Services, and we make our decisions. I make a decision based on what he gives me, and we continue to discuss. And I was telling you before we start how Gonzalo was a bit troublesome last week, the uncertainty of the tracks and so on. How do you make decisions with such uncertainty, because you still have to use the science to really back you up, and before you make an informed decision and be able to advise the Prime Minister and the other policymakers of what you would recommend him or her to do.
Thank you. That's quite the responsibility that you have on your shoulders there. Melba, a question from you.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to toss it back over to Shelley. Actually, we have a question that came in on our Facebook feed. I just want to remind everybody as well, they can post questions in the chat and we'll ask them to our panelists here directly. Shelley, we have a question here asking, does it have to be an actual mask or could it be a face covering that's acceptable?
In St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
St. Vincent, yes.
I believe face coverings are acceptable. And the way Canada puts it is the use of protective face coverings. So once it protects the nose and mouth, I think that is, it's sufficient in St. Vincent. Maybe Michelle can qualify that, but once, and it doesn't have to, it can be a non-medical mask. It doesn't have to be a medical mask. Just keep your nose and mouth covered. And another thing I meant to mention is there is a list of approved hotels for quarantining in St. Vincent, that they've passed certain tests with regard to, you know, being able to host people for quarantines. So if you are going down and need a hotel, there is a list available. You can contact our office. It's online. They're in Beckway, they're in St. Vincent, they're in CARI-ON. So, you know, you can have hotels on different islands depending on your final destination.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. I'll just ask Ms. Forbes if she has anything to add to that about the face coverings versus masks.
No, not really, because I myself, I wear the cloth mask. Those are more comfortable for me. So you can have, as Ms. John said, you can have once your nose down to your mouth is covered, you know, using different material. That's fine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm just going to ask you, Ms. Forbes, we have another question that's come in here actually for you specifically about NEMO. I know you do have a website. They were just asking an individual here in our Zoom chat if you have the list of items that are needed listed on your website directly.
No, we don't normally, as I indicated earlier, we don't put out a needs list per se until after an event. Between the key agencies, between our regional agencies, for example, I will be able to say to another ministry or another agency that, okay, I am low on a particular item, XYZ, but it's not something I will put out to the public like that, because we know our stocks in the warehouse, but there are things that I know, the items that I spoke about, I know those are things that are always in need. Not that we don't have, we have, but I know in a major event that, you know, these things can actually run out, because sometimes when you think you may have enough, I mean, we are looking at targeting having at least 10,000 cots in stock, you know, those kind of things, and scattered throughout the country, because we know if we have a major impact, about roughly that number of persons would be displaced. If we go back to 1979, we had 20,000 persons being displaced. You know, that's roughly 20% of our population, but we are looking at a target of having enough bedding, for example, for 10,000 persons, 12,000 persons, and that's our target, because we don't know when a major event is going to happen. So those are things that we are working towards. So in normal times, we may not necessarily put out a list. After every event that we put out, we do put a list out, but we speak among our agencies, we speak among ourselves, and let each other know what we are short and so on. But as you know, so things change from time to time, and it depends on the event. If it's a flood event, you'll need more cleaning supplies and that kind of stuff. If it's a hurricane that has strong winds, you may need more materials. That, you know, those are things that you'll put on a list right now. And then of course, you know, so different events. If it's a storm surge event, you know, the sea is coming in, which is similar to a flood event. So it really depends on the event as we go along. But there are general things that we always need, that I mentioned earlier, like the cots, the bedding, you know, hygiene kits, cleaning supplies that you can actually just give someone, a family, a bucket of supplies and every mop and everything that is in there that they can use. Now we need more masks, because, you know, persons may turn up to the shelters without masks. So we have to ensure that we still have some supplies if persons turn up without those things. And I think that is really going to be the new norm going forward, that we always keep masks, especially because, you know, we have a volcano and we can have an eruption that people need to cover and protect themselves from the ash. But now it is a different environment that we realize that we'll need a mask for different things. So you can contact us and we can share some of the things that we we need, but you can also say maybe your agency can provide X, Y, Z that you will be able to provide. Not to speak too long, but some of the things we are working at is that, you know, a little projects, if persons in the diaspora want to get involved in, let's say, adopting a shelter, we can say, okay, let's work with the shelter, let's work with a community, and, you know, work with NEMO and having training programs on how the community can actually be able to train and support themselves within that community, whether it's first aid, whether it's CPR, whether it's which light search and rescue, shelter management training. Those are other areas that you can get involved in.
That sounds fantastic. Love those suggestions, Ms. Forbes. Just want to get a sense, just for our listeners, how many shelters are there currently in place in St. Vincent on the mainland? And do we have any in the Grenadiers?
Yes, we have in the Grenadiers. We actually have 149 shelters thereabout on the list this year. In the Grenadiers and Union Island in particular, we may have up to 15. I don't have my list in front of me. And then we have some, all the islands have emergency shelters in terms of the islands that are managed by the government. So CARI-ON, Beckway, and Union Island. Mustique do have shelters, but they do not make it public, but they will give us the list of shelters that they use, properties that they use as emergency shelters in Mustique. So all of the islands have shelters. We have about 46 are schools, 77 are churches, and the others are in between our community centers, learning resource centers, and even some preschools.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Very insightful. Thank you.
Melba, just before you continue, I just wanted to go back to the previous question about the person was asking about what's needed. Just to let you know that we are in constant communication with Michelle and her team there. So if you're interested in, you know, wanting to know what's needed down there, feel free to reach out to us here at CARI-ON SVG Disaster Preparedness. The email address again is in the chat box. So please do feel free to reach out to us. Now we have time for, I believe, 2 more questions. We're going to wrap up very shortly. This question is for Michelle again. Now, you know, when we speak of disaster, we automatically think of hurricanes, storms, you know, floods. What are other types of preparedness, disasters that you guys work on or prepare for? Obviously, COVID, it hit us, and that fell under your umbrella. But what are some of the other disasters that you look at, or that fall under your control?
Well, we tend to focus on the natural hazards. We do get involved in some of the others. So the other natural hazards that we have, of course, the tsunamis, that we paying attention to, the earthquakes that we tend to forget, that we're living in a seismically active region. And if you have been following, you notice we have had earthquakes here and there around us over the last few years. So earthquakes are one. Of course, the volcanic hazard, because we are living with a live volcano. Nasal can erupt within 48 hours, you know, and that is one of the biggest threats we have if we haven't to manage an eruption in 2020 or even beyond. That can be one of the challenge for us, because we have better houses and better homes in those areas. And I mean, so for persons to have to leave leave your home now, it's a little bit more heart-wrenching now, because persons are attached to that. So we have the tsunamis, we have the earthquakes, we have the volcanoes. We also mix in now, of course, include the climate change and in our natural hazards, letting our populace know how climate change is making things a little bit worse. We're becoming more dry. Sometimes we have the intense rainfall, the extreme rainfall events, stronger and more intense storms. So we bring in also the climate change. It is not a hazard, it's a phenomenon, but it also is impacting the hazards and making things a bit worse for us here in the Caribbean and indeed St. Vincent and the Grenadiers. We work with different agencies, we work with schools on their school disaster program in terms of having the schools prepared for different threats. that the schools may face. We work on evacuation drills. One of our programs that we just completed in Union Island is actually with schools, with the community, and installing tsunami signs, tsunami warning signs in Union Island. If you go to Union Island, whenever you come home, you'll see the signs there in Union Island showing you where the evacuation routes are. And in a month, about a month or so, we'll also have those signs on mainland St. Vincent between Kingston and Argyle, because those are the community that we work with, showing you the evacuation routes. Where do you go to if there's a tsunami in particular? So we also work on areas. We work with the Ministry of Health on pandemics, on epidemics, because they are the lead for those health emergencies. So we work with them, we support them, and we have a very good working relationship with the Ministry of Health in those areas. And we work with all agencies of government in encouraging them also to develop their own disaster plans. What do you have in place? A storm is coming. Do you just pack up your books, take your bag and you go home? No. What do you do as a department? What do you do as an individual? And what do you do at the community? So our work is at the national level. It is at the agency level, and it's at the community level. And we like to focus on the community because all disasters are local. If the community is impacted badly and they cannot recover and start to do their own preparations, it affects the national response. So that's why we have to zero in a lot on work on the communities, and individuals have to really also take that responsibility. So our work is not only hurricane season. Many persons think so. I wish it was so in a way. So because we work all year round, as you know, sometimes when you try to get me. And now with the whole disaster management has changed significantly over the last 10 years. There's so many different things now coming into play. We would have thought of a pandemic and read about it and say, what if? We would have planned for scenarios like Irma and Maria, but we have lived the reality in some of the Caribbean territories. We have seen the migration from our own sisters and brothers having to return home. So the reality is here, the reality of the COVID and this kind of response that we have to activate nationally to really manage these events. It is real, and we have been managing, I think, in my opinion, we have been managing so far, and I think kudos to all those persons who have been involved, especially in the COVID-19 response. And these are the teams that we actually work with here at the national level, the teams from the Ministry of Health. They're embedded within our NEOC, and we also have to maintain that COVID response during the hurricane season, because we don't want persons in quarantine in the shelters. We don't want persons positive in the shelters. So that whole component, that health cluster, has to be throughout the entire hurricane season and beyond.
Wow. I'm really impressed. Thank you again for sharing. Melba, do you have one last question before we wrap up?
Yes, Hayden, we have several questions coming in. We're not going to have time to get to all of them with us wrapping up. I'm just going to ask one question here again to Ms. Forbes regarding the shelter. There's lots of questions coming in, to be honest. And once again, remind everybody, you can keep your questions coming in and we will respond via email, the way the original communication was sent out, and our Facebook feeds. But somebody asked a question about the shelters and if they're wheelchair accessible.
Not all shelters are wheelchair accessible. Those that we have advocated and asked to be retrofitted over the last 5 years or so have been wheelchair accessible. The new shelter that has just been constructed in Camden Park, that is fully wheelchair accessible in terms of bathrooms, getting up to the shelter and all of that, because we tend to have the differently abled or those who have mobility issues, we tend to like to place them in the lower floors. And that is so incorrect, because when the floodwaters come, they affect those on the lower floors and not those higher up. So as we continue to make some improvements, as we continue to renovate and retrofit emergency shelters, it's mandatory that we have access for persons who are differently abled or for persons who have mobility issues. So not all emergency shelters now are really wheelchair accessible, but as we go along and we have fine projects and we do some improvement, we are ensuring that they are.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. I'm just going to squeeze in one last question here to Shelley, if you don't mind. It came in on our Facebook feed, Shelley. Somebody asked, they said that their niece came from abroad. They didn't say what country, it was Canada, United States. And they said they did have a negative PCR test, but they were still tested once they came to St. Vincent. So I don't know if you'd like to comment on that. And if you can also comment, Shelley, quickly about how the test is performed, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll say the test is the nasal swab test that's done right on the spot at the airport. There are doctors, healthcare professionals on site. As a matter of fact, the chief medical officer, the medical officer of health have all been on site to ensure that things go well. If you have a negative PCR test that does not meet the requirements that they wish in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you will be subjected to another one at the airport. And, you know, sometimes you do go to a hospital here, and I've had that happen to someone. You go to a reputable hospital, it may be a smaller hospital, but the type of report that they give on the COVID, it may just say negative to COVID-19. But they in St. Vincent may require a little more information as to what type of tests you did. You know, was SARS on the list? Was this? Was that? So I think you need to go to a facility that would give a detailed, you know, a little more detailed report than just to say that it was negative COVID. And I'm not saying this is what happened, but this could possibly be what has happened.
Okay. Well, thank you, Shelley. I suspect that's what happened. It wasn't a detailed.
Yeah, because I know that people have gone to Sunnybrook, they've gone to North York General, and they have had no problem with, you know, the tests. But there's some smaller hospitals, which, you know, I guess, you know, small community hospitals, it might be a little less, you know, reporting. You may have done everything. It's just that the reporting is not there on the proof of tests.
Right. And just to add, Shelley, there's also an electronic form that they have to fill out as well prior, correct?
Yeah, the pre-arrival form is it's online, both on the government website, gov.vc, and Ministry of Health, MOH. MOH is Ministry of Health, .gov.vc. It's right there. We try to share it all over Facebook, and where you fill it out and submit it electronically. Just so that they can do the pre-assessment before you arrive.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Over to you, Hayden.
All right, so we're just about ready to wrap up. I'd like to maybe just give the panelists and Melba an opportunity to say last couple of words. Michelle, over to you.
Okay, just want to thank you for having us on your program today. And we, while we're in the hurricane season, we know that we are faced with different hazards or different threats here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we thank the diaspora for their support over the years. And we'll be happy to come back again. I know we didn't get all the questions. We'll be happy to join you another time so that we can really have a bit more chit chat on what we do here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the area of what we call disaster risk reduction. So thank you for having us, and have a pleasant evening.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for being here. Shelley?
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks too for having me on your program today. I certainly learned a lot from Michelle, so that's great. I hope people have a little more insight into what is required in these very unconventional times of travel. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact our office by phone, by email. We're happy to answer any questions. I want people to know also that when they do travel to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, several of the hotels, or most of the hotels, are tourism approved. That is to say, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Tourism Authority does approval of hotels, and we do prefer that you stay in one of those hotels. They do have emergency plans. If a hurricane hits, whatever it is, whatever disaster, they do have a plan, and these tourism approved hotels would have gone through all training for that sort of thing. So any questions at all, feel free. If you are intending to travel, please get a negative PCR test. They are asking for it at the airport on check-in at Air Canada. As soon as you arrive at the airport, please remember to put on your mask. Nobody can accompany you into the airport. If you have somebody who has mobility issues, make sure you request the wheelchair prior, because you would have to say goodbye to them on entry to the terminal. And that's about it, I think. Anything else, feel free to send the questions, and we will be happy to answer them. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Shelley. Melba?
Well, thanks, Hayden, first of all, for co-hosting this event with me. And thanks to Shelley and Michelle for, wow, this has been an extraordinary session, I have to say. I learned so much. I am so impressed by the protocol that's in place, the disaster preparedness efforts that have been put in place for St. Vincent. It's impressive, considering the size of the islands and considering the advancement of St. Vincent. It's just to show how far St. Vincent has come in so many years, and I commend all of you for your efforts. Here in the diaspora, you know, we're going to continue our efforts to assist you over there, as well as much as we can, to help support in the events of any emergency. And I encourage everybody to travel to St. Vincent, you know, follow the protocols for COVID-19 if you insist on going during this time. But in the future, when things start to die down, I encourage, you know, nationals in, you know, here in the diaspora to return back to St. Vincent, those who have not returned back for several years. Because as you can hear, St. Vincent's come a long way, a long way, and in a very short period of time, and it's absolute paradise. That's from my personal experience, and I encourage.
You're not biased at all.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to go to St. Vincent, and I'm so proud of all the information that was shared here today. I learned so much, and it just encouraged us that, you know, when we started CARI-ON, why we started, because we are passionate about St. Vincent. I'm of Vincentian descent, both mother and father, and that's the reason why I, you know, joined on these efforts to help for disaster preparedness. And, you know, just hearing this here today, I've heard about other countries and everything like that, but just hearing it from you, Shelley, and from you, Michelle, you know, all the information about COVID and disaster preparedness, I'm truly impressed. So thank you, ladies. I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I commend you both for what you're doing for St. Vincent, and we try to continue to support you the best that we can.
I would like to thank you, Melba. I'd like to echo my vice chair's sentiments, with the exception of she was born here in Canada. I was born in Union Island, so. But everything she says, definitely, I learned so much. I'm so pleased, so happy that both Michelle and Shelley could join us today. Thanks, Melba, for all your contributions as well, the three of you, for making this webinar a success. To the audience, I want to thank you once again for your support and for allowing us into your homes. And that note, I will say good night to everyone, and please stay safe. Stay safe. Good night, everybody.
Night.